now act for 250 US clients, including Starbucks and LinkedIn, DuPont, Tyco, many other famous names, Boeing. But all of that started from that little meeting in Leeds where we had a list of potential targets. So we then sat around and thought, well, okay, here are the people we want to get business from, but what will we actually say to them when we get there? And the lady who ran the conference centre thought we were all a bit of a comedy act, and she said, what are you trying to achieve? So we explained that we had this list of target clients in America, that we were going out to see them, and that we were coming up with some messages. And she said, have you guys ever had any sales training? And we said, no, we're lawyers, we don't do selling. So she said, well, you'd actually find it might be useful if you learned to sell. So we did some role play as to what it would be like if we ever met one of these big US companies. And one guy from our Birmingham office was absolutely fantastic. He just seemed to ask all these great questions and turn every role play into business. And I was trained in how to sell. So from that point on, we employed a company called Huthwaite who developed spin selling, where you go in and you ask questions of the client, you ask open questions, you ask specific questions. Now this is very hard for lawyers because lawyers don't listen to anybody. So it was quite a skill having to learn how to listen. So then we went off and did the sales training, we trained lots of partners, and off we went to the US, and we learned to listen and we learned to sell. And from that we developed a huge multi-million global business. But this is entrepreneurship. You have to start from somewhere. You have to start from ground zero and build up how you're going to develop a business. So what lessons did we learn? I think it was to be clear about what our messages were, clear who our target clients were going to be, and to have confidence. Because we didn't think sitting there in Leeds that we could be that successful at winning all these US clients. So we got someone, a PR guy from the US, to come across, and he said, you've got an open playing field. There are very few companies offering what you're offering. Our big competitor is called Freshfields. He said in America, Freshfields is known as a grocery chain. They've never heard of a law firm called Freshfields. So this gave us the confidence to go out, and we built a network. We found that the buyers of our services were all in-house lawyers. So we went to the in-house lawyer conferences, we wrote articles for the in-house counsel magazines, and we became famous as the firm to go to. So the other lessons we learned were, having found these clients, having got some business, it was then vital to deliver on the promises and actually to deliver a quality service. The other thing we learned very quickly was that it's no good just doing the work. You have to constantly get feedback from the client as to how you're doing. So we did this very big job for an American company. They came over and said we'd done a great job, and they said, and how did we do? And I thought it was very strange for the buyer, the client, to be asking how we'd done. But feedback is vital. At the end of every project, go to the client and say, how did we do? And get some feedback, and that really builds the relationship. Accept rejection. All these meetings we went to, probably only 10% turned into business. And at first you take it personally. You've made the effort to go there to tell your story, but you don't actually get anything out of it. But that isn't personal to you. That's just the reality that not everybody wants to buy what you have to offer. There are lots of business books in the world, lots of books on entrepreneurship. Most of them are pretty useless. But if I could recommend, is that true? If I could recommend one book, it is a book by Stephen Covey called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I can summarize, it's a thick book with lots of diagrams, but I can summarize it in 3 sentences, which is, be proactive. You know, you have your destiny, you go out there and you do what you want to do. Begin with the end in sight. Be clear about what it is you're trying to achieve. And the other thing, which takes up about that much in the book, I can summarize as, don't stress about things that you can't influence. I could worry about the war in Russia, I could worry about what's going on in Istanbul. There's nothing I can do about it. I can only stress about things I can have an influence on. The final thing that Covey talks about is what we would call nowadays a work-life balance. He calls it sharpening the saw. And it's the story of the man who's sawing away endlessly and making no progress. And somebody says, you'd do a lot better if you sharpened the saw. And he said, no, I've no time to do that. I'm too busy sewing. And this is known as Covey's sharpen the saw. And this big job I mentioned, the Americans came over and they said, we only have one question to ask of you. And all my senior management were there. And they said to me, do you sharpen the saw? And I said, I have the 7th habit. And my partners thought I was absolutely mad. So if you read nothing else, read that. So I hope you could glean something out of that. But all these things which seem big and impressive and important all have to start somewhere. And if you just pursue your dreams, you can get there. I have to shoot off now I've done this, but does anybody have any burning questions before we have the next speaker?
Do you have any regrets?
Oh, I have too few to mention, as they say.
What was the worst mistake you made?
Becoming a lawyer, probably. Believe it or not, I started off, the jobs I've done have been hospital porter, industrial cleaner for a year, and the job I enjoyed the most, for 2 years, I was a professional entertainer touring the world doing puppet shows. So I performed in communist China, communist Russia, did the cabaret circuit, had a wonderful time, and my wife said, you have to choose, because you can't be a lawyer by day and a puppeteer by night. So I chose the law. But it would have been quite nice to carry on doing the puppets. That's the answer.
You said about work-life balance. How much do you actually get?
Me, none.
Yeah, I thought that.
Yeah, because I travelled. Last week I was in Chicago, Washington, New York, Los Angeles, thousands of miles of travel. Get home a week before, Middle East. But it's good, you know, I can't complain. It's a good job to have. But no, I should sharpen the saw. We have a huge marketing department, and they spend lots of time writing stuff for our website. They send these big glossy brochures out. You know what? I don't think anybody reads them. And all our lawyers stress about their description on the website. Do you think clients in the world who want, you know, a problem solved will go through all these different firms' websites and read all this stuff and pull out brochures? The answer is they will call somebody they know, somebody they've met, and you have a relationship. So last week, when I went to Deerfield, Illinois to meet this guy, haven't seen him for years. It finished by him saying, I'll come and see you in London and I'll introduce you to my people in Europe. I don't think, if I hadn't have gone, he'd have thought, all right, I remember somebody in London, I think I met him a few years ago, I'll have a look at his website. But the fact that I went only last week is very powerful. And the reality is a lot of people don't make that effort to go and see clients, potential clients, and just tell them what you have to offer. So I think there was an article I read last week which said that marketing without sales is really a waste of time, because sales is getting in front of clients and telling them your story, and that's what turns into business. It's not what you write. As I said, lawyers are the worst, because lawyers are trained to give solutions. So if a client says, I was in Paris yesterday, they would say, we've got an office in Paris, we can help you there. Whereas proper consultative selling, spin selling, whatever you call it, are learning not just to listen, but to ask different types of questions. And the reason why you ask all these questions is to uncover needs. And these might be needs that the client themselves doesn't even know they have. And then they'll say, well, come to think of it about it, I've never really thought about that. And that's something I would be interested to hear more about. All selling, if you listen to the jargon, a continuance is the most important thing you can get from a meeting. A continuance is not where you agree to do something, it's where the client agrees to do the next step. And that's successful meeting. Is that according with your training?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi. What one piece of advice would you give to budding lawyers or solicitors? One piece of advice.
One piece of advice. It would be to sell and not be. I think a lot of lawyers get very wrapped up in the idea of the traditional what a lawyer should be like, but it's very competitive. When I became a solicitor, there were 25,000 solicitors in England and Wales. There are now 250,000 solicitors in England and Wales, of which 25,000 are unemployed. So it is a very, very competitive market, and you have to stand out. And just being able to do the day job, go down the court, convey a house, doesn't really get you on in life. So what I've learned, and a lot of lawyers will recoil when you say the word sales. That's not what I was trained to do. They'll say I was trained to be a lawyer. But the reality is that if you meet, as I get to do in this job, very senior people in the very big firms, if they went to an event like this, they would be the last to leave because they're at it, networking all the time. They don't just disappear off as well, I would tonight, but that's for a different reason. But do you know what I mean? You have to be able to stand out and be famous for something. Can I have two? Be famous for something. In America, they have a baseball term called splendid splinter, and it refers to a baseball player who just stood on the line and slugged it. That's all he did for 30 years or whatever he played. And that was his splendid splinter. And if you can find a little piece of the world where no one else inhabits, you can be very successful. And you have to apply that to your own circumstances. But say in a legal career, occasionally I've done cases which have been new and different. And so I've made the most of those. I've been in the newspapers, I've been on the radio, and I become famous. So for a while I was an expert on historic canal litigation because I'd done a case in the House of Lords. But that's a splendid splinter. Just find something that you can own, and then you're not in the pack. I think I've probably had my time. So thanks for your attention.